Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
I am Adam Summers, and you are in season 6 of Wrestling at Random, where the theme is more wrestling than ever. If you're on for season 5, you might be thinking, it's the same theme. Well, this is more than more. This is most wrestling than ever, I guess. Some 60,000 hours of professional wrestling have been dumped into the randomizer. Truly, legitimately, randomly chosen shows each and every week. It could be an episode of weekly TV from any professional wrestling company around the world. It could be a pay-per-view, major card, any and all things. This week, it's kind of crazy because we have, on the face of it, okay, yeah, this is a relatively obscure territory. We are going to review an episode of International Wrestling from Montreal, June of 1986. What's the exact date, Jeremy?
June 21st, 1986.
June 21st of 1986. If you are one of our patrons, thank you, by the way, if you are, we appreciate your support at patreon.com/wrestling at random, helping bringing, by extension, this free feed to everyone who listens for free. Over on the bonus feed, just a couple of days ago, if you're listening in linear fashion, an intentionalizer, someone who supports the show at that tier where they can choose something for us to watch. They chose for us to watch an episode of International Wrestling from Montreal from October, I believe it was, of 1986.
October 17th, 1986.
The randomizer, again, completely random, not gimmicked. We have to keep saying this. The randomizer then pulled an episode of International Wrestling from Montreal from just 3 months prior for us to watch completely at random. Again, out of these 60,000 hours of professional wrestling that are in the randomizer, it is almost impossible to believe, yet it is true that this ended up happening.
The man who requested International Wrestling over on the Patreon, Patron Richard, he sent that request in January. A full calendar month before I ran the randomizer for this week's episode. And it pulled an episode from the same year. It's absolutely unbelievable. We laughed about it just a few days ago on as the episode dropped over on the Patreon. And here we are in the free feed, going back just a few months prior to the episode we reviewed there to talk about a territory that before Patron Richard pulled it for us. The randomizer had never pulled, and I had not had a lot of exposure to the Montreal territory, especially from 1986.
I don't think this was even in the randomizer.
It definitely was
as an
not.
option until season 6, and we dumped even more in.
Yes, because we found more content on YouTube, I think. This one was available on YouTube as of the time of this recording, so you can go find it. International Wrestling from Montreal, June 21st. 1986. That's how the randomizer found it. And yeah, we'll get into the territory here. It's just really funny to think about
the odds,
and the collective hive mind of the Patreon supporters here now infecting the randomizer too. It's extra
because
fun.
Again, this isn't like, well, someone chose an episode of WCW Monday Nitro from 1997, and then the randomizer pulled an episode of Nitro from 3 months earlier. This is already almost as obscure of a territory as you're going to find, particularly in terms of things that are available for the here on the free feed. It's completely ridiculous.
Yeah, the closest thing we talked about it was we got a SmackDown from 2010 over at on the Patreon, and then we ended up getting a continuation of that SmackDown via the randomizer. That was the last time something like this happened. And here we are again, this time more obscure. But that was SmackDown. That's something you would think.
Yes.
There's a ton of episodes of WWE content easily available in the randomizer here. This is pretty obscure stuff, and very excited to go into this territory. Before we get into the review of the show, we did, as we like to do here, so we mentioned how this works. We spin up the randomizer every single week. It pulls something from the thousands and thousands, the 30,000 plus hours of wrestling content that it found on the internet, in all the corners of the internet, private and public. And it pulls something for us to watch at random. we like to give a little bit of history, a little bit of context. What was going on in the year that this show took place, 1986. We talk about the history of the territory, how we got here, and then we'll get into the show so we can get our minds set to 1986. We will drop in at this time the history recap we did over the bonus feed, because obviously it's the exact same territory, the exact same year. So let's take a listen. For those who aren't patrons, this is the kind of stuff you get over on the bonus feed as well. So let's drop in here the history of international wrestling from Montreal. Pat LaPrade from the Wrestling Observer newsletter. In the 1950s, the Montreal territory was promoted by Eddie Quinn. Business was starting to get tough in Montreal, and Quinn lost his weekly TV program in the fall of 1960. When Channel 2 decided to drop wrestling, Quinn approached Channel 10, and by September of that year, he was back on TV. When Quinn retired, Yvon Robert started his own promotion.
I believe, as someone who watches a lot of French language Montreal Canadiens home broadcasts, that'd be Yvon Robert.
That is correct. Yvon Robert started his own promotion, running a few shows on the Montreal Forum, beginning in July 1963. But he was mainly using the Paul Sauve Arena, which we'll hear about later in this broadcast. Johnny Rougeau, the famous Rougeau family, Johnny Rougeau decided he wanted to get back into the wrestling business after selling his nightclub. On May 6, 1965, at the Paul Sauve Arena, All Star Wrestling was born. The first move after that was to get on TV. To do so, he took Quinn's master tape, which Robert inherited at Quinn's death in December of 1964. Without either asking Robert's permission or offering him a partnership, he went to Channel 10 to pitch this new show. The show was approved, and Rougeau's new promotion, On the Mat, started in 1966. The relationship between Robert and Rougeau fell into disarray, with Robert being angry at Rougeau for not including him in this venture. The animosity lasted for many years. Robert didn't want to work for Rougeau, but it's clearly the main reason why he went to meet with Maurice Vachon in Minneapolis about starting Grand Prix Wrestling, which we're familiar with. We've seen an episode of Grand Prix Wrestling before. Grand Prix Wrestling started in June of 1971. 2 months later, August 1971, Johnny Rougeau decided to call it quits. The reason wasn't Grand Prix Wrestling. No, it was in fact junior hockey. In 1969, Johnny Rougeau bought a team and participated in what is now known as the Quebec Maritimes Junior Hockey League.
What was the team?
I don't have the team, but
oh man,
by January 1974, so like he was so entrenched in Canadian junior hockey that he became the president of the QMJHL.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Johnny Rougeau was the president of the Q.
Yeah.
Holy crap. This is so I'm looking up let's see, Jean Rougeau, better known as Johnny Rougeau, ice hockey. The Rosemont National and the Laval National in the Quebec Major Junior League. Mike Bossy played for his team. He later served as the league's president.
Yep.
From 81 to 83. To this day, the team that has the most points in the regular season, so the QMJHL equivalent of the President's Trophy in the NHL, is named the Jean Rougeau Trophy.
So this is why I had to tell this history, because like we are both big hockey fans, and so whenever there's a hockey wrestling crossover, I couldn't help myself.
He also gave, I'm looking right now, he gave Ivan Koloff his ring name.
Yes.
He's the one who named Ivan Koloff. That's crazy.
By January 1974, though the Vachons had left the Grand Prix promotion and the shareholders couldn't work well together, All Star and Grand Prix promoted a few joint shows. And That was all that was left as Grand Prix met its end. Johnny and All-Star Wrestling had won the war. Rougeau sold All-Star Wrestling in the spring of 1976. Soon after he sold the promotion, Channel 10 canceled the On the Mat show. And after being on the air for 10 years with no wrestling in the Montreal territory, International Wrestling, the show we're about to watch, it was launched in 1980. It was promoted by Frank Valois.
Valois?
Gino Brito, who we'll hear about later.
We'll hear a lot about him on both international wrestling shows.
Tony Mule and Dino Bravo. They were
Dino
the ones
Bravo.
who were they started and launched International Wrestling. It became Quebec's major wrestling promotion. International Wrestling was one of the many regional companies that folded when confronted with competition from the WWF, with the key blow being when the WWF signed the Rougeau brothers. After that, the top local draws, Bravo and Rick Martel, wound up in the WWF, and eventually the WWF made Brito its local promoter, a position he held until he disappeared from the Montreal wrestling scene after his much publicized arrest. The company.
You should also mention the you talked about Dino Bravo being one of the people that got plucked away from international wrestling. That is touched on in the Dino Bravo Dark Side of the Ring episode.
Yeah, we always reference the fantastic work of Dark Side of the Ring. If you haven't seen the Dino Bravo episode, go out of your way for that. The company, International Wrestling, went bankrupt in June 1987, which was less than a year after the WWF raided all of their top talent. When it comes to the WWF talent raids, here, this is just a few months prior to the show that we watched. We actually have some of the top talent is still here. We've got the Rick Martels, we've got the Dino Bravos. They're still here carrying the territory.
SAMU is here very early on in his career. We'll see him on the show in a video package. And there's someone else who we also, what was it recently? Again, I can't remember whether it was on the bonus feed or the free feed. We saw Frenchie Martin as an active wrestler. And here he is again, there it was. Yeah, in the Maritimes. Here, that was over on the bonus feed, correct?
Yes, correct.
I think that was the same page.
Grand Prix Wrestling.
Yes, Grand Prix Wrestling. Exactly. Here, we will see Frenchie Martin as an active professional wrestler pretty shortly before he joins the WWF and is managing Dino Bravo.
Let's get into this show here. The commentary team. Tell us about how you learned this man's name was Milt, because
Milt.
The audio is not the best quality on this.
No, it's very muffled. It's not like it's consistent throughout, but it's just very, very lo-fi. It sounds like taping AM radio, with a cassette tape straight off the radio, and it not coming in particularly well. But the play-by-play man is Milt of Ruskin, who the only way I could figure out what the name was, I rewound several times when he said it at the start of the show.
Me
at
too.
The very end of the show, we get closing credits like an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, and it lists Milt of Ruskin as the play-by-play man. We have Gino Brito Sr. Is on color commentary here with Milt of Ruskin, which is already a difference between the show we watched on the bonus feed, which was just Milt of Ruskin flying solo.
We'll get to Gino Brito in a little bit here. The junior varietal of Gino Brito. He's in our opening match. These two run down some of the folks we will see on the show, and we go to that opening match. It's the team of Ron Ritchie and Gino Brito Jr. taking on the team of Richard Charland, who we fell in love with over on the bonus feed in that episode that we reviewed over there. That was our first introduction to him. Here he is teaming up with Frenchie Martin, who you would remember as the manager of Dino Bravo from his late 80s WWF run, here
Also,
as an
the
active wrestler.
managing the Rougeau brothers in the WWF as well. It's crazy. Like, I just remember as a kid seeing him as a manager in the WWF in like 88, 89, and thinking he was the oldest man alive.
Yes.
And here he's just a couple years prior, and he's an active wrestler doing matches.
Brito is in there with Charlon. Charlon off the top rope tries a leapfrog that goes wrong, and he turns and just grabs a hold of Brito and just pulls him into the corner. Maybe this was on purpose. I don't know, but
I don't believe it was. Yeah, it's just this awkward leapfrog, and then he just waist locks him. It takes him to the corner, and time stands still before eventually.
Well, Richie does not tag in here. I thought,
No.
you back him into the corner. Richie's going to tag in. He does not.
Which again made me think this was not planned in any way, shape, or form. Gino Brito Jr., I should say, hits a monkey flip out of the corner. This is where Milt of Ruskin tells us that the Long Riders, who we've seen quite a bit on some of the AWA shows and some other territories as well, the Long Riders had been given an ultimatum to defend the tag team titles. They had been refusing to defend them. They did not defend them by the prescribed date, so they have been stripped of the tag team titles here in international wrestling. We'll have more news on that later. The thing I noticed right away watching this match is that all four men have roughly the same build. They're all like 5'10", 240 in like pro wrestling weight of that era. Not jacked, but not fat. They're just solid, unremarkable physical dudes.
Charlon starts beating down Brito. We get a gut wrench suplex by Frenchie Martin, but Brito kicks out. I legit thought that might have been the finish, the gut wrench suplex from Frenchie Martin here.
I was shocked to see Frenchie pull out a gut wrench suplex. I thought that could be the finish, but Charlon tags in and hits like double fist, double punches to the guts. Super cool. Again, we talked about it, how much we loved Richard Charlon. Really, I don't think we'd ever seen him before until we saw him in the International Wrestling on the bonus feed, and he's very good here as well.
Brito hits an atomic drop on Martin and makes the tag to Richie. Richie is trained and can do moves, unlike Brito Jr.
Yes. Brito Jr. is not very good. He is clearly an Nepo baby here on this show. Richie is in, hits like a flying double cross chop that Milt of Ruskin, of course, because every play-by-play guy has to say this in the 70s or 80s at some point in a match. He calls it you guessed it, judo chop.
All four men are in the ring. Brito and Richie get rammed into each other. Martin.
This looked nasty. They got that. That's one of the hardest, like, not really like a double noggin knocker, but they just get shoved into each other. This looked like it sucked to take.
Martin and Charlon try a double clothesline to Richie, but he ducks, drop kicks both men. Then Richie flips over the legs of Martin, and he gets the pin. I was like, what an upset here. Ron Richie and Gino Brito Jr. are your winners. I was just saying that Gino Brito Jr. was untrained, and this team is the winners.
He's the son of a star who was on the commentary team. So, yeah, this I was surprised. Again, this felt like, didn't quite feel like a squash match, but the men who won felt more like enhancement talent than the men they were facing. Jackknife pin by Richie on Frenchie Martin for the win. I did love how both Milt of Ruskin and Gino Brito Sr. are sure to say that Frenchie would have kicked out if it was just a second longer, which doesn't matter because it's 3 for the win. But they were sure to say that. We go to we get a replay and we go to break, and you are lucky here as freeloaders. Unlike the people on the bonus feed, that show did not have the commercials left in it. Here, the commercials are left in, and we love us some 80s commercials, 80s Canadian commercials, 80s French Canadian commercials. Bring it on.
That's right. Our first French Canadian commercial is for Foster's, Australian, for beer. It's now brewed in Canada. And the thing about this beer commercial is they're drinking Foster's just in a bottle. My American ass is used to the giant cans of Foster, like giant oil can looking things of Foster's. This is just a bottle of Foster's. It was really weird to my American eyes.
I had never even heard of Foster's.
Yes.
Uh,
There's plenty of listeners here on the free feed going, yeah, the giant can. I know Foster's, the giant can. No, it's the Canadian version was in a bottle. Yeah.
so the next commercial, Music World, has today's hottest albums, all for just $6 on cassettes, including the hit album from Billy Ocean. One of the other things that could happen, yes, you could buy all these cassettes for $6 a piece, or if you enter a contest, you could win a swimming pool, I should say, full of audio cassette tapes. This is the mid 80s, packaged quite nicely, Eric.
Yes, they advertised Billy Ocean. They advertised The Outfield. All of these. It was $6.95 on LP or cassette. So if you wanted the vinyl too, we go to you get a Speedy commercial for a new muffler
where everybody's just walking around like zombies, holding a steering wheel. They're not driving; they're just holding a steering wheel. This is weird. We then also have a Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial where the only thing that really stood out to me was they said herbs instead of herbs. I know they say herbs like in the UK, in places in Europe. I did not know they said herbs instead of herbs in Canada.
11 herbs and spices. My note on the KFC commercial, still Kentucky Fried Chicken in the 80s, obviously. We've lost the jingle in commercials, and that made me sad because this was a fantastic jingle, and I wish we had more jingles in commercials.
In some ways, it's a reflection of modern society. We do not have whimsy anymore. Just a total dearth of whimsy. That was not the case in 1986 here in Montreal.
We go back to the show and back to the ring. I didn't get this man's last name. Jack something. Do you have?
I have Jeff Ripley, believe it or not. His opponent is a man who looks like a cross between Max Muscle and Mike Awesome with zero charisma, so definitely leaning more towards the Max Muscle side of things. A man named Steve Strong that we went down a rabbit hole about, again, on the bonus feed show, and figured out about halfway through his match on that show that Steve Strong was the mighty Yankee who we just saw a week or two prior here on the free feed in World of Sport. And he was terrible in that setting, but it blew my mind that, again, we talk about the weirdness of the randomizer. This guy, Steve Strong / the mighty Yankee, just a total nothing in the professional wrestling business. I believe you said that he also had like a one match in WCW in 1990 or 1991. But the fact that this guy was a featured wrestler on two completely different shows here on the free feed is insane.
Yeah, as soon as I saw his name was Steve DeSalvo, all of a sudden, all of the alarm bells went off, and you remembered that he was the guy from World of Sport, the mighty Yankee. You might know him as the Minotaur, signed by WCW in January of 91. He wrestled one match on Saturday night, defeating Man Mountain Bailey. Steve Strong is bad. He was terrible. He's been bad in every performance we've seen so far. He is a jacked up green guy who's he doesn't do anything good other than be big without charisma.
When I see a guy like Steve Strong, it makes me appreciate Lex Luger so much more. Lex Luger, the 80s and the 90s, there's certain types of fans are, Lex Luger is terrible. Lex Luger sucks. When you see a guy like Steve Strong, and there are dozens and dozens and dozens of Steve Strongs littered throughout the territories in the 80s, even going into the early 90s in different places, so many of them are so much worse than Lex Luger. Luger had something. He was not Ricky Steamboat. He was not Jushin Liger, but my God, he looks like Ric Flair in the ring compared to this guy.
Strong hits a back elbow, some shoulders in the corner. He drops an elbow. He picks up the guy at a 2 count. He doesn't want to pin him yet. This is a slow, boring squash.
Like he's big. He's doing things that are ostensibly like violent, but nothing he does looks violent. It's almost an accomplishment to be that big and that muscle bound and not be intimidating or physically imposing whatsoever. He looks like a giant version of Quiet Storm, if you remember him. That's kind of the vibe that he's given off. Just not good.
Strong hits a running power slam, does a lot of posing. He gets the guy in the tombstone position.
This again.
And then he rams him into the corner, still holding him in the tombstone position. And then he turns to the different sides of the ring and then hits the tombstone pile driver for the pin. After the match, Strong hits a middle rope elbow drop and then throws him over the top to the floor.
We then get a slow motion replay of the jumping 69s, which was certainly not something anyone need to see here from Steve Strong. It's also funny that in that other match from the other episode of International Wrestling, he hit this horrible, weird tombstone, didn't go for the cover, and then hit that second rope elbow drop as the finish. Here, the second rope elbow drop is the post-match attack. Milt of Ruskin on commentary here is talking about how he wants to see Steve Strong. It's all the top stars that come through international wrestling, including Rick Martel, Dino Bravo, and the Road Warriors, who are apparently making appearances here, which is insane.
We get a promo from Steve Strong. He's going to meet former AWA champion Rick Martel.
Ricky Martel.
That's right. This is like a cocky, soft-spoken promo. He's not good at wrestling, and it turns out also not good at talking.
He definitely needs a manager. This is very low budget. This promo, the idea is it's kind of like the localized promo type of thing that we would see in other territories, but it's clearly in someone's apartment or house, and there's just an international wrestling backdrop hung haphazardly. We then get a recap of this whole story. And Milt of Ruskin, as the video is playing, tells us the match is signed. Can Strong pile drive and injure Martel like he has so many others? Milt is really, really, really trying hard to make Steve Strong seem like a thing. But man, does it not hold up when you actually see him.
We go to commercial. I'm told that after they brew Molson Golden, which is a beer I've never had, Molson Golden, they age it cold before bottling. And that's what makes it, that gives it the smooth taste.
So this whole commercial is about how Molson Golden commercials usually aren't serious. But this man in a suit says, finally, a serious Molson Golden commercial. And he very seriously explains everything you said, shows how they make it, how they brew it. And then the commercial ends and he walks away and he gets further and further away. And we see he's not wearing pants.
He's got no pants. He's got a suit and no pants, and this is before Zoom calls working from home. So like this was fun, or like this was a surprise.
Clearly pre-pandemic. We then see that women are excited about their bingo night. This is a commercial for Variety Club Bingo.
The Variety Club Bingo halls. We then get a frozen Mexican pizza commercial, and then Goodyear. I'm told Adam Goodyear runs 100 tests using a computer, and then Goodyear
100 tests in a single minute with their new computer.
Yeah, at the Goodyear Certified Auto Specialists. We go back to the ring. Tom Zenk is in the ring taking on Roger Peru.
Yes, that Tom Zenk from Robbinsdale, Minnesota, the same place that Ravishing Rick Rude and so many others were from. He looks exactly like the Z-Man that you would see in WCW, 3-4 years later, obviously as well in WWF, Can-Am Connection with Rick Martel. This match is in a different arena. And his opponent, who at first I thought they called Richie Bloom. Again, the audio is just terrible. He's small, but he's wearing a Bundy singlet,
Yeah,
which
well, I recognized him immediately from the show we watched, and that's how I knew this
well,
was
see,
Roji Peru. I
again,
looked up my notes from the previous show.
the issue, which we have not clued people in on as well, is that I watched this before the Patreon one. This was going to be the show you're listening to right now was going to be last week's show here on the free feed here for season 6 of Wrestling at Random. We were about to record, and I start talking about the guys that are on this show, and Jeremy's like,
Nope.
none of these men are on the show. I think I watched the Patreon show. So we had to shift gears and do Ring of Honor last week instead. Luckily, we had both watched that. So yeah, for me, these men were all new. I had not seen the greatness of this man in his Bundy singlet while being sub 6 feet tall and barely over 200 pounds. That never fails to make me laugh.
Tiny, doughy Bundy singlet is exactly what we want out of our jobbers here. This is tremendous. Tom Zenk, you mentioned he looks exactly the same. Like, he had a stretch, probably 10 plus years where he looked exactly the same. Like, this man, like, we've seen people who start old and remain old the entire time. J.J. Dillon syndrome. And Tom Zenk, the opposite of that, where young guy looked young the entire time.
Yeah, you think about him here in '86, him in that locker room with Rick Martel, those awkward promos. Remember on that one tape, the one Coliseum tape that we watched? I believe that was what it was from. And then we've seen him in WCW in the late '80s, early '90s. Looks exactly the same. He looks no younger here than he did, or older. Like, he looks exactly the same.
Tom Zenk working a leg. This is where they go into a podcast basically telling us about Bull Johnson and Bill Irwin are going to be defending the tag titles as the Long Riders.
Not defending the tag titles. This is a decision match for the held up tag team championships after Scott Hogg Irwin. You can never just call him Scott Irwin. You have to say Scott Hogg Irwin. That's what I learned here from this show. Basically went AWOL, so they had to vacate the titles. So it will be the new Long Riders of Bull Johnson and Bill Irwin. They were originally going to take Tom Zenk and some guy named Alofa. That's who they're going to take on for the belts. But Alofa stepped aside so Dan Profit, Tom Zenk's new partner, could team with Zenk to go after the tag titles. Like, to my recollection, I've never seen them team before. I can't recall them teaming anywhere else. And yet this team makes perfect sense. Like, they feel like they should be tag team partners. Of course, we always associate Dan Profit with Doug Furnas, both in All Japan and their brief WWF run. But yeah, I'm excited to see these two guys team.
Yeah, and we got to see this progress in October. So we know that a few months from now, there's still a team, this Zenk and Profit. This match is going way too long.
Yes.
Zenk hits a crossbody, but he's too close to the ropes. Zenk puts on a sleeper to get the win. And Milt on commentary says, quote, "Some folks take a Valium, others take Nitol. Peru is counting sheep."
And immediately when he said Nitol, I heard the Nitol helps you get your Z's. That commercial, it was one of those, you'd hear it every commercial break, no matter what you watched. Always weird to me when the baby face with the sleeper hold is slapping guys in the back of the head to wake them up afterwards. It always feels like such a heel move, but yeah, we get that
thank
here.
God it's a babyface move, because if you don't slap the guy on the back to wake him up, he dies. That's just 80s sleepers and the physics behind it. So thank God Zenk was there to wake him up.
That is very true. We also had during the match Milt telling us that Scott Irwin had a falling out with his brother, but Wild Bill Irwin did not want to admit it. And then he and Gino Brito go on and on about how this is an unconfirmed rumor. Then why are you bringing it up? What's going on here? After the replay of the finish, we now go to the same very low budget looking interview setup. Tom Zenk is asked, has he heard any of the rumors about where Scott Hogg Irwin is? Zenk has no idea, says he won't back down. Dan Crawford shows up. He tells us that he came to Tom Zenk's rescue. He says, they tried to kick my face off with a loaded boot. Apparently, this is the promo where they came together as a team. Like before this, like in the world of this minute of this promo that's happening, they had not yet been a team. Yet, 10 minutes earlier here on the broadcast, we were told that these men were a team and the match was already set for them taking on the new Long Riders for the tag titles. Yet here, this promo is the announcement of this title match happening. Very weird.
It's going to get weirder. We'll get to it later when the Long Riders have their promo. Here we go to a commercial where Angelo Mosco is at the bar with a couple of women. He's big on Miller Lite because it's less filling and tastes great. This is like a jolly Angelo Mosca. I don't think I've ever seen that.
No, the whole thing is weird. Angelo Mosca.
King Kong Mosca is always like a heel to me.
100%. He's here. This is for Miller Lite. He's got the women on each shoulder. And for some reason, we see for like a nanosecond a graphic of certificate of analysis. I have no idea what the point of that was. We then go to Don the Snake Prudhomme, a drag racing legend back in the day, doing a commercial for friction proofing.
Yes, you put this treatment in your engine and it gives you friction proofing. Then we get a Diet Pepsi commercial, which was just a weird 80s vibe, just giving you all the vibes.
Well, it's two things. It's a weird 80s vibe giving you all the vibes, but it's also, as we've talked about 80s commercials in previous episodes of this podcast, this is the era of one company absolutely shit talking another company. Here It's Diet Pepsi. They show Diet Coke with the Diet Coke logo and just say how much better Diet Pepsi is than Diet Coke, how much Diet Coke sucks. They show Diet Coke being lame in a bunch of situations, which always cracks me up. We go from there to
just to reiterate your point. It's the thing I love about the number 2 brand and the thing that the best number 2 brands, Burger King, Diet Pepsi, or Pepsi versus Coke, Burger King versus McDonald's. The number 2 has the ability to get weird and push boundaries and try things because they are number 2 and they're the ones that are chasing. And so the challenger brand has that flexibility, and it's the thing that WCW was able to do it for a little bit, and it's the thing we challenge AEW in modern times to say, be the number 2 brand and steer into it and take those types of chances.
Well, I think without a doubt, the most successful wrestling company in that role was ECW. Absolutely. ECW's entire identity was exactly what you described.
It's a perfect comp. Then we get a commercial for Flirt hair color from Clairol. I asked my wife if she was familiar as a hairstylist, if she'd ever heard of Flirt hair color from Clairol. She said no, did not. So don't know how long this product lasted or if it was a U.S. product at all.
I wonder if it only lasted 6 shampoos.
Nice. When I colored my hair when I was in my punk rock days of high school, I would use Born Blonde to strip out all the color in my hair. So it was like whitish blonde. And then I would get Manic Panic from the record store and make it bright red or bright purple. And it would last more than 6 washes. It was good. But then it would start to fade and you'd have to put more Manic Panic in.
What is the Patreon tier that it would take for you to do that for the podcast over on the bonus feed?
That one is just a Venmo straight to my wife because you have to get her permission for that first. And then we get a Crime Stoppers tip line. It works because you care. And then we head back to the ring. Jim Londos versus Man Mountain Moore with his manager Floyd Creechman.
So Man Mountain Moore, is that the guy that Steve Strong wrestled in WCW for that one match? Did he bring Man Mountain Moore with him?
So you would know Man Mountain Moore as Mike Moore. He did appear in
I would not, by
WCW.
the way.
Yeah, I don't, you're a WCW guy. He appeared in Starrcade 1990. He teamed with Mr. Hughes to take on the Skyscrapers,
Oh my, he was the Motor City Madman.
and at the
Wait,
Clash of the
wait,
Champions.
can you confirm that he was the Motor City Madman?
Yes, yes. So
Oh my
he
God,
that
that's
is that is Mike
wow.
Moore. Yes, Man Mountain Moore
I
here. He
I rem-
also wrestled the Clash of the Champions, Clash of Champions 13, Thanksgiving Thunder, where he was defeated by Lex Luger.
I 100% remember both of those matches vividly. It's funny because here, I'm like, wow, he's like, I thought was this guy supposed to be Bruiser Brody with the furry boots, but he's just totally nondescript, short-haired big man. He was. It's blowing my mind that he was a Motor City Madman. We should also note his opponent is not the Jim Londos. It is not the biggest draw in the history of professional wrestling here.
It is not.
Coming out of retirement, 40 some odd years, and not only coming out of retirement, but coming back from the grave 11 years after he passed away. He would have been 92 years old if he had been alive to wrestle the future Motor City Madman here. Unfortunately, that is not the case. You mentioned his manager, Pretty Boy Floyd Creechman. This is
when we only had one pretty boy. We over in the Patreon episode we reviewed, lousy with pretty boys.
Three different pretty boys.
In this match, Man Mountain Moore is just a big man doing big man things. Hits a backbreaker, a falling power slam. He drops the guy throat first across the top rope, then puts him in a Canadian backbreaker for the victory. Man Mountain Moore dominates quickly.
It always begs the question here, as the show took place in Canada, is it just a backbreaker?
It's probably just a backbreaker.
Also, that's his standing power slam, running power slam, certainly not to the level of when Davey Boy Smith
or Steve Strong from earlier in the show.
I don't know. That talk about a clash of the Titans. That would have been. Instead, though, we hear that the international champion Dino Bravo will be defending against Man Mountain Moore here. And I'm just thinking about like 1989, 1990 WWF Dino Bravo against Motor City Madman from like 1990 in WCW. Just thinking how of all the WCW versus WWF dream matches that like PWI would have put together for like a hypothetical match, that would have been really far down the list.
We get a backstage interview with Ricky Martel.
Well, before that, we get a really cool video package that goes on way too long, but a cool video package for a very young SAMU. We see him.
Oh, that's next. That's after this.
Oh, okay. I had it before that.
Yep, we get the Rick Martel segment. He talks about Steve Strong being big, powerful, and vicious. He can give it, but can the man take it? He's not running from Steve Strong. Strong reminds Martel of this balloon, and then he starts blowing up a balloon. He's like, he gets bigger.
Does the balloon voice?
He gets bigger. And the bigger he gets, he eventually blows up, and the balloon pops when he gets too big. And so I don't know if this was. I'm taking it as a steroid joke, but Martel is just talking about him being over muscled here.
Well, and Martel making steroid jokes when you think of how big he got just a couple years later in the WWF is certainly something. It is wild, though. Like, we see Rick Martel. We'll see this video package coming up with SAMU, who, yes, it was a few years before SAMU would end up in the WWF. But, like, I can't think of another territory where WWF came in and, like, they took the guys that seemed like stars, and there was nobody else like that they left that seemed like stars. Like, they took the one or two guys, and everyone else, like, they just left there. Like, Rick Martel is so much bigger of a star and comes off like so much more legit than anyone else on this show.
No, I mean, he was, in that early AWA run when he was, even before he won the AWA title, we saw Rick Martel and we're like, wow, this guy is awesome. Like even in his 70s, like his late 70s, he was a WWF. We saw him in the
Tony Gurria.
WWF with Tony Gurria, and we're like what a mismatched tag team this guy. This
Yeah.
guy is the star carrying this team. Yeah, so he's always been a guy who just leaps off the screen in these different territories. We get the great SAMU video package here. We're told he's in Japan and will be back at the end of June. He's all over the world destroying wrestlers and coming back here to go after the International Heavyweight Championship. Lots of top rope diving headbutts. Super fun video package. More SAMU, please.
Yeah, a long video package. They use several of the clips over and over again. Janet Jackson's "Nasty Boy" is playing in the background. I'm pretty sure that's a Janet Jackson song. We see a cool second rope DDT that's almost like what it's actually very similar to what Jushin Light. Actually, more like Scott Steiner's DDT off the top that would be assisted with Rick having the opponent on the shoulders, but looked really cool again for 1986. We then have Pretty Boy Floyd cutting a promo saying SAMU wants the international title and Dino Bravo, which, man, I bet that was something.
Yeah, he rants at Bravo on behalf of SAMU. We go to commercial where Midas is fixing a station wagon. We get another Molson Golden commercial.
Same commercial.
And then we're told all hardworking Canadians should rub it in for aching muscles. It's
Absorbine.
Absorbine is the product.
Yeah, it absorbs into your muscles.
You would recognize the jingle of rub it in. You'd recognize that jingle. Glade adapted the tune for their plug it in air freshener campaign in the 90s.
There you go.
And then we're told if you wear your Toronto tee, and Ziggy will be around giving away tickets to concerts at the Wonderland.
Yeah, and Ziggy is not a mascot. Ziggy is a woman who is a DJ at the local radio station, and she's randomly approaching people and giving them concert tickets, and they seem legitimately excited. I would be excited if someone approached me and gave me free concert tickets. So this is pretty cool. We come back from the break, and it is Bill Irwin and Bull Johnson, the new Long Riders. Bill says they didn't defend the belts because Canada has no teams who are good enough. There's some really old guy managing them. This is not Pretty Boy Floyd.
No, I don't know who this is. They tell us how the belts are held up, but they are ready. They were ready to wrestle, but no wrestlers would get in the ring with them. Whereas they're asked about Scott Hogg, and we're told he's taking care of some business. Next week, Bull Johnson and Bill Irwin will take on a combination to be named. They named him many times on this show. They completely aired every single one of these Long Rider mentions out of order.
No,
this one goes first. The one we saw prior goes next, and then the first one we saw goes second. Like this is
So it's
what are we
this
doing?
promo would be first, then you would have the Z-Man and Dan Crawford promo, and then you would have
the match
that little video that Milt of Ruskin did the voiceover for, saying that next week we've got the title match between these two teams. So again, like I remember WCW back in the day on syndicated shows would have things like this happen from time to time too, but it's so confusing and completely takes you out of it.
But it's not just one thing. It's three things out of order on this for the same thing.
Really, really not good. Quality control is certainly not there. We come back from the break. Come back from this interview. Rick Martel is in the ring taking on a man named Diamond Jim. Steve Strong is here. He has a mic. He wants the match with Ricky Martel tonight. This is where I noticed that here, this is a different building than the first match was. The ringside seats, like front row, have to be like 30 to 35 feet away from the ring.
So far away.
I thought New Japan had us far away from the ring when we were front row in 2024 at Windy City Riot. This is like twice that distance. Diamond Jim, the opponent here for Rick Martel, looks like the most generic Magnum TA you have ever seen in your life.
Yeah, Martel says, "I'm here anytime you want it." But they can't wrestle now. The match is signed for another time, and Martel has a contract signed for right now against Diamond Jim. So Steve Strong coming out here to make the challenge, knowing that Martel couldn't take him up on it. Martel hits a hip toss. He's pumping his fist. It's babyface Ricky Martel. He's loved by the people. Jim goes to the eyes, hits a back elbow. Diamond Jim's choking Martel. Puts his head down for a backdrop, and Martel kicks him in the head. The backdrop by Martel. Martel slams the big guy, hits a drop kick.
This body slam, Diamond Jim takes this body slam like he is Superman flying through the air. Like if you freeze frame one particular spot of it, it's one of the most absurd visuals you've ever seen in wrestling. He is good for the role here. Rick Martel, we mentioned it a little bit earlier when talking about Steve Strong and his build. It is shocking when you see any of like Rick Martel, like 84, 85, 86, how completely different he looks physically from when you get to WWF. It's one of the best examples of what you had to do to get over and even get a chance in WWF. Here, like he's in really good athletic shape, not skinny, but like just good athletic shape. And then 2 years later, he's just ripped to the gills in a really unnatural way.
And still considered a small guy in the territory when he's in the WWF in the late 80s, early 90s.
In either major promotion now, as we record this in 2025, he'd be one of the biggest guys in the company, whether he be in this 1986 build or his WWF Jacked build.
After a backbreaker, Martel to the apron, he slingshots himself over the top into a splash and gets the pin on Diamond Jim. We just saw Bam Bam Bigelow do this move.
Yeah, good call.
In 1988. Here, Rick Martel gets the win with the move. Bob Villasera is interviewed in the back. He runs down all the baby faces. He's back in the territory. We see Tom Zenk working out in the ring, doing lots of sit-ups. He hits a great drop kick and has a great tracksuit on as the credits roll over the training montage.
I also loved in that Bob Villasera interview. It's a great story for why he doesn't have a championship. He says he wrestled the European champion in Europe and won, but since he himself is not from Europe, he is not allowed to call himself the champion. Tremendous.
Favorite thing on the show?
I mean, Rick Martel is far and away the best wrestler on this show. He looked great in the short amount of time that we had him on here. Like he looked like a guy who was a legitimate world champion level wrestler, which when you look at everyone else on this show, it's a pretty stark difference. It was also cool to see young Tom Zenk basically looking exactly like the Z-Man that we'd see a few years later. Nothing else. I don't know. Nothing else really stands out.
Honorable mention of the great SAMU video package.
Good call.
Fun stuff.
And some of these commercials.
The commercials always top notch. Worst thing on this show besides the things out of order.
Steve Strong's delayed jumping tombstone.
Horrible.
I mean, everything about Steve Strong, but that in particular, not good. It's certainly, again, like you see this guy and you appreciate the few really muscle-bound guys that were good wrestlers because it wasn't even like he was a Sid Vicious who wasn't a great wrestler, but just had this incredible aura and looked like he could kill people. He was the exact opposite of that.
Yeah, honorable mention to Brito Jr., who is untrained and horrible in the ring.
I mean, one half of the winning tag team in your opening contest here.
Yeah, we always say the test of a TV show from a territory is would they get you hyped? Would you come back? And 2 episodes in, I'm for sure I'm a supporter of the Montreal territory. I'm watching more Montreal for sure. There's enough guys and superstars at this point to get me excited. There's a feud or so in October, and then the thing dies. But I think in its heyday, this would have had me coming back and going to the auditorium for the matches.
Yeah, obviously there was some stuff that wasn't very good on the show, but there are enough good wrestlers and of interesting wrestlers. Obviously, Rick Martel, who was one of my favorite wrestlers as a kid. So I know if I would have seen him on here sight unseen, I would have gotten into it. Richard Charlon, an example of a guy who you really wouldn't have known about if you hadn't seen this territory. There are a couple guys on the episode we did on the bonus feed that were similar. So yeah, this isn't like prime Florida or prime Memphis or prime Mid-South or anything like that. But this also isn't one of those territories that we've watched for like, man, I don't know if my lifelong affair of professional wrestling would have ever started if this was the first and or only wrestling I had as a kid. I like you. I'm pretty sure there was enough here that this would have hooked me and made me a wrestling fan as a 5-year-old.
And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Make sure that you follow us on all the social media platforms at Wrestle at Random. Make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel. At the time of this recording, just shy of 500 subscribers. So we need you to help us get over the hump of the 500 mark. Go, even if you don't consume your podcast via video format, just going over there and throwing us a subscribe helps us work the algorithm so other wrestling fans will find the show. And you can see Adam's sweet Montreal Canadiens hockey shirt.
Yes, I was, I always try to find something that's appropriate to wear for the show. I could have busted out my Strike Force shirt, but I just wore that on a recent episode. I'm like, well, I'm a huge Montreal Canadiens fan. Let me pull a Habs shirt out of the closet. So there you go. Whether you want to see my face or not, you can go and see the shirt. That's a much better idea.
So again, throwing a subscribe there. If you consume via audio, of course, stay subscribed through any podcatcher of choice. If Spotify's your podcatcher of choice, you can have audio and video, both of them on.
Super cool. I just discovered that a week or two ago when checking to see if the show was up, and I'm like, oh my god! Like in the Spotify player on your phone, you're just listening to audio. You can watch the video as well. Very, very cool.
So we appreciate all of the support we also get at our Patreon, patreon.com/wrestling at random. Over there, you can support the show, get over 200 bonus episodes that you haven't heard before. In fact, another episode of International Wrestling is over there, but 200 more episodes that you haven't heard over in the bonus feed. $5 unlocks the entire back catalog for you. Give it a chance if you haven't, and make sure you tell your wrestling fan friends about the show. Wrestling fans know other wrestling fans, and we rely on your word of mouth to continue to support the show. And with that, now we're wrapping it up. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Randomizer. Thank you, Patron Richard, for planting the seed in the hive mind of the Randomizer to bring us to this show. Who knows? Will we have a third episode of International Wrestling next week? You never know.
Thanks again, everyone, for listening, and we'll talk to you again next time.